have kind of like day-to-day freedom that makes them very unslave-like. The Jews were not in that box. The Jews were also not in the box of the nobility or the knights. So people like that engage in various activities that are specifically related to forms and manners who the burghers or the sort of incipient middle class who were dealing with various types of commerce because Jews were heavily urbanized. But even in urban centers, were free to buy formal burghers at it. They were typically denied access to a whole range, and so they weren't really in the burger class, the burger status, even though they tended to, in their lifestyle, be closest to them. It obviously burger-like activities they had really in tax farming, leaseholding, and so on, and a lot of by the king, in exchange the Jews' protection of the royal, basically how they managed exist in this modernity. A lot of things changed for the people in these provinces. Like living in cities, industrialization was happening, and people were like moving into factory structures of rural agrarian life. But it was like a period of transition where you might have people who would go back to the ancestral farms and essentially do surf-like activity during the harvest season, and then they would go into the cities during the winter and work like blue-collar jobs in these burgeoning factories. So it was a very kind of the 18th century and 19th century. The Jews, for their part, were really pressing to get more rights of residence to move wherever they wanted to free from the hated Mora Judaico, this evil oath where because Jews were considered intrinsic, they had to endure restrictions when they were making an oath in court. They had to stand on a pig skin, sometimes for their chest there, holding on to a sacred Torah and so on, access to higher education. They wanted access to generally everything that was going on in culture and science and society in the modern era. And the emancipation movement was something that slowly, in fits and starts, grounded these things to Jews. Obviously, it was very closely related to the Haskalah that we discussed in this video, the Jewish Enlightenment, because while the Jewish was primarily an intellectual movement that was about going into line with the intellectual currents of contemporary European culture, it was also a political movement saying, if Jews can be reformed in terms of their use of the vernacular, in terms of their relationships to society, and understanding their civic responsibilities, then society should in turn give them the legal rights of citizens. Let's not forget that for much of medieval history, Jews were considered formerly travelers. They were like aliens. They were not considered like normal subjects of the king like everybody else was. Most kings in general were the idea of societies being made up of particular that's something that was coming of age. And the Jews were finding their ways to do their. Jews did not constitute the major challenge to African American slaves, were the big challenge. America is very much a society that is still trying to come to terms. Jews were really, but not quite white. This is not the place in this class to talk about the gradual whitening of the Jews, but one of the things that is largely true of American society is that Jews were generally considered like not quite white like Northern Europeans were. And by the way, this is not only Jews, this is also Irish and Italian people and so on. Up until really the 20th century, these people were considered kind of like off-white in the skin tones of social structure. Obviously, there are differences that we tend to stay visually, but especially when you get into kind of the middle range, it really, regardless of their skin color, it happens to coincide, of course, with the Irish and with the Italians, who are also generally called African Americans, African American far. So, and also these nearly white peoples, like the access to society in early America, the Jews were like a lower priority for their exclusion. And the kinds of disabilities that Jews faced in the 18th and 19th century America were comparatively minimal. There was questions about whether or not they could hold public office, some issues of whether or not their oaths would be trusted because they would not take them on Christian Bibles, for example, and really easily dealt with. The Constitution of 1786-1791 clearly indicated that Jews should be free of these disabilities, although vestigial oath laws did persist in some states until 1877, when the last one was removed. That was applying specifically to New Hampshire. So in other words, the United States of America, a very small Jewish population, nearly white, it's not really that difficult to actually make that big step in emancipation. In England, you have a fascinating social change, legal change. Hated Jewish oaths, that he would not oath that indicated that he was a Christian. So in other words, we have a situation where, and this happened, by the way, to many elected officials in England until the whole process was eventually solved, where the population thought that the Jewish candidate was the superior candidate for a position, and they voted him into office, and Charlie him. And it was the office itself that was trying to hold back on allowing this Jewish candidate until eventually, after significant debates in English governmental circles, they showed. So that invasion for Jews in England actually came from a groundswell of support from the voting populace. France has an entirely different story. Here you see a depiction by the Declaration of the Rights of the brackets This is, of course, a it's not interpreted to mean really how revolution. Wait a second. Right? So what we have to do is differences like woman. So that's thinking about man. Honestly, it says man and man. The diversity that makes humanity. And in the case of man, social change precipitated legal change. In France, it was legal change that persisted. In other words, the laws were put on the books before society was totally ready for them. So what happened in France is you have the revolution. And then, right, we're also part of this revolution. And philosophically, it was really hard to say no because so much of the grounding of the French Revolution, like the American flowery highly dense and concentrated Jews living on the eastern part in the region of Alsace-Lorraine. Sephardi Jews largely spoke French, largely had a lifestyle in terms of their dress and their far more observant than Jewish law. In the street. So what happened is in 1790, the emancipation was extended to the Sephardic Jews. And large populations of Christians in a lot of complaints are sent to the Emperor Napoleon is typically so do they have like a representative body or something like that? So his advisors told him, oh, they have this thing called the Sanhedrin, which was the from Israel, actually not to exile, but shortly thereafter. As to what he wanted from him. He wanted to know if he was going to be accepting a state within a state, maybe comfortable to French law, something like this. He wanted to know a little bit about the assimilation ability. The assimilation of the Jews. For example, are Jews allowed to marry non-marriage is not permitted under Jewish law. Obviously, 21st century phenomenon enhanced by traditional Jewish law, although some of the denominations that are active today, of course, have different relationships to that question. But in the 18th century, the answer was no, not allowed. It's fascinating to know that the Assembly of Notables and leaders which were made up largely of not only a very small number of Jews who represented the traditional Jewish nation, what we would call the Orthodox. As well, not exactly, they knew what kind of answers Napoleon wanted. This episode is brought to you by Onyx on Hunters. The most dramatic moments in the why. Turn he has the war. Even without service. Would the daylight language what's over the next bridge? Every single step. Best hunters are lucky they're prepared. This is how you get there. So before your next hunt, get on it today and use the RE for 20 was satisfied with those answers and said, great. So the Sanhedrin became a formal institution, and they was he was actually still studying to this day. He was one of the four that gave it kind of like his weight on the right hand of the Jewish spectrum. There's a lot more to say about how Napoleon was within France, but I believe that this I think we should spend a little bit of time talking about East Central Europe. So in Austria, a document was issued by Kaiser Joseph II called the Overland's Patent in 1782. This was kind of like a very important pre-emancipation document that gave the Jews of Austria a formal understanding of what their rights were Austria. And that's very important because and it creates circumstances for emancipation. But what happened over the next 100-odd years was really quite distressing and confusing. Austria, like much of East Central Europe, went through a revolution in 1839, and that revolution was then pushed back. And the revolution the spectrum. So with the general over the 1860s, although emancipation is going to result in assimilation, and he said we should not accept emancipation. We should demand to have unequal rights because that's really social change in urban areas. That's a big bit of issue. Hopefully we'll come back to that a little later. Finally, this intensive, long struggle specifically with regard to a very grudging manner, a tremendous amount of social hesitancy. So like a great contrast with England, social change demonstrated readiness for very little social readiness for emancipation. There were some, bright lights here and there, like Christian Willem von Dahl, who wrote very to very provincial threats as a publication of the latter's history. Von Feitschke Jewish history, and okay, I guess that's about it. Thank you very much for watching. Cancer is just like yikes. Yeah, but maybe. There be a way. If you could do that logo to the area that's being demonstrated, they're sort of functional, and over the years they go with my hand, and then they realize, oh boy, yeah. Well, it's interesting because what's happening with X-rays or CT scans is a fast forward kind of random damage that causes cancer in the first place. And so because it's random, let me kind of go back a little bit as to why does cancer happen in the first place. So let's go way back in evolution to the first time that there were single cells. First time that two cells met each other and said it was better to join forces and cooperate rather than to divide at each other's expense. So in the process of that happening, those two cells came together, four cells, they basically said, together we're better. These social compacts and contracts that genetically were formed between all of these cells were formed to the point at which what could happen is that anyone
cascade becomes so rather has a whole different ecosystem of contract, and so there's no one size fits all drug that will kill off all cancers because the contracts are different. So as opposed to there's a breaking of contracts, you might miss out on a treatment, a therapy, or a drug that would help people. I wanted to ask, I don't know if you know anything about this, but is there a connection between extreme hormones, all the stuff that women have to take, between that and tumors? I honestly don't know, so I don't know. I have my colleagues that Google it and said that's not surprising. Probably there hasn't been a study yet, and if there is not, there should be. I mean, certainly any hormonal balance. I mean, so for instance, back to my specific disease, I feel there's all kinds of things like NSAID, acetylcysteine, benzene, all these other accelerants. Yeah, not good. So because there's all these feedback mechanisms. Scientists are not. Etc. Something like us to exist. I just, well, yeah, it's awe-inspiring. Sure. Anybody doesn't think it is not paying attention. Well, because, fats, and a lot of the fats aren't necessarily a good thing. I mean, that's been relative. As a vegetarianism, I think there's a really and we succeed on the works as a society, as a civilization. So, but, but again, it's a cost benefit. The cooking of them, I'm not sure about that. I believe so. I believe that's the case. That cooking meat actually. More easily absorbed by the body. It could be broken down more readily. But certainly it kills bacteria. So, I mean, yeah, we're not vultures that digestive yeah, that's so I absolutely know that. But like I said, I'm 64. If I answer scientist is to be today, but writer tomorrow. Because we're always back checking what the results are to ideas that are discussed and published. And then people are very reluctant to accept new evidence that's contrary to that. I mean, it's always, as I often say, in the context of something that gets predictions are great. That's what we said. The machine was wrong. It was, it's a glitch, or because it means something that doesn't make sense. And that's, of course, where all advances come from in the sciences is by the fact that the data off the curve somebody was curious about what it meant to go after it and then say, okay, now that I've stepped back and seen the new picture, now I can create a model that incorporates that curve in my head. This is an ad for better health. The internet is a breeding ground for misinformation. Even a simple search for ways to get rid of a headache can produce. When you do find something that's true that works for other people, it might not work for you. In some cases, it's better to just ask a living, breathing expert. If you have a headache that won't go away, talk to a doctor. If you're struggling with your, try for yourself a better health. There are millions have benefited from their services, and there's been people rated solely as the largest online therapy provider in the world. BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Talk it out with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/JRE. That's betterhelp.com/JRE. One of the reasons why I was really excited to have this conversation with you about the research that you do is that I think it's really important to illuminate to the general public the sheer scope of the task of trying to figure out what is going on with all these different things that can go wrong and right in the human body, and that it requires this fucking insane amount of effort by many, 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 many people, and and then the amount of data that had to be collected now. And so here's the difference: is that there's data, there's evidence, there's conclusions and proof, and it's an uphill climb. But proof, the next one up is my lab has been largely responsible, at least partly responsible, for the data deluge that's out there in the world. How to do tissue biopsy analysis, how to do single cell analysis, etc. And data felt good for a while. It was like this, this feedback. Oh wow, I can get all this data. And suddenly you look at it and you go, what the fuck is it? And so humanity had then suddenly finding this unique moment that gets it out. And so our unique moment about 2 years ago was artificial intelligence, where suddenly I had the ability. So normally I would cut those data and go, okay, well, it seems yourself. Here, expert. Stanford, trying to get information means something. And you saw with AI, can 22 million aliens just, or something. several millions understand the technology well, and AI can be for me. And the angel and the devil on my shoulder. That makes sense of things and ways that I never would have been able to before. Especially in my lab, have developed an agentic AI that is basically just a scientist in a box. We can pose a question in natural language, and then say, hey, make sense of this, and turn it into a network. Normally, I would have taken a graduate student months and months to. Now in 3 hours, we can get pictures and hypotheses of how old it's in ways that I never could have done before. Answer some of my best right. And so, humans still in the loop. And so, with all of this together, now we can make meaning out of the data. And we can skim a lot of the intermediary steps, just getting better. I mean, for instance, I put in a couple of papers now where, so for instance, there's what's called the tumor interface. You have the tumor, you have the immune system, which is coalescing on here, and then in some cases, the tumor creates a boundary, a barrier between itself and the immune system, where there might be certain kinds of cells that the immune system, the tumor has told the immune system, ignore us, we're not here. And then what we now can do is, well, populations, you find these things called tertiary lymph nodes. Okay, lymph nodes where the immune system makes decisions. The body has a mechanism to create sort of a forward camp of immune cells that the more of those you see in a tumor, the better we will collect cancer patients. We looked at hundreds of biopsies, and we did that pseudotype analysis where we looked for mature tertiary lymph node structures, and then we looked for immature, slightly less mature, even more less mature, etc. And we were able to backtrack to the cell types which need to come together that would then form the more mature. What uses that as a nice paper, but it also now tells us what I do to create more of these in the tumor. Because the more we already know from multiple kinds of tumor types now, that the more of these tertiary lymphoid structures you have, the better off will be your outcome with chemotherapy. So it might be, for instance, that once we know that you have a disease like this, we can give you some kind of therapy, a virus or whatever, that goes and goes to the tumor, seeds the beginnings of these initiators, these cytokines that are produced that are necessary for initiating the formation of these objects. And so there's a huge benefit to that. We never would have finally without the AI. That's fascinating. Now, are you using like a standard large language model, or do you have like a specific structure that's built that interfaces with large language models? So we use, we can use pretty much any of the LLMs, but right now we find that OpenAI is the best, for us at least. And then we create an agentic overlay. Basically, what's called a chain of thought, which is a series of questions. So how we talk with it was we basically came up, here's 100 kinds of questions. Scientists carry those to make sure that we do hypotheses, and we create thousands of types of hypotheses that are in the same order. Now, generates hypotheses where you can literally tell you, oh yeah, so that it's mutually beneficial in us. And as I do that, is commercial having a lot of trouble at Stanford in the early days. Commercialization was evil. And at Stanford. And so I think that's an important process because scientists are good at asking good questions and coming up with solutions, but scientists are the best at commercializing and turning into a product. I have been with all of them. We thought, you know what? AI's moving so fast. Why don't we just give it? We can use it for maybe specific targets. We can use it because we've seen other people make claims about stuff that they've already made. It's like, what's that? So why don't we just put it on GitHub and let people there? The commercial existence and the commercialization. What was the so back when I was both of the 90s, as opposed to but then there were limits to how much money largely because the basic research was a desire of a certain point to say, would they do anything about this? So the translational research became a push. So I at Stanford won the Nobel Prize for you don't have to be Idaho, or we can be part of it already. And Stanford wanted to be an enabler within the medical school. Basic research as well as making it directly. So to link clinician and desire of clinicians with the basic researchers who are against like commercial. So when I started that's they have the first activated cell score, and then what are called humanized antibodies, which go up in hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to Stanford. And they gave personally most of their own money away. They kept enough to survive, but then they gave most of the money away and then all that a lot of that money. But so I had learned from them about how to still do basic research but commercialize on the side. And so I wanted to bring that back with the department that I came to. Was it a courageous decision to ignore them? Was it just interesting? Here's what I see. The NIH funding is made to use retroviruses and complete libraries of retroviruses to reverse the process of evolution in a way that rather than viruses hurting the cell. I set it up so that viruses would help the cell. They would figure out what they did. And so we solved hundreds of million using retroviral basically find target some of the beds of viruses went to our advantage. The concept of reversing evolution is fascinating because it comes with there's so many ethical implications, but if you didn't have any of those, and you could do that large scale. Well, I had developed in David Smith from Locust Scott Line Pair a means, it's called it was a way to make the research production system so there's a lot of sort of integrating but the problem with that was it took 3 months. So I had brought with me a cell line or 3T that I introduced to the lab. And hey, maybe we can go into the details of line, but we could do it in 3 days or 3 months. And so that now tens of thousands of labs use that worldwide or any of my other conventions. Just because Stanford, rather than patenting licenses, and licenses are forever, whereas patents have a 17-year lifespan. So Stanford made a choice. So do you think it was just a bias, an academic bias, like we shouldn't be focusing on money, we should be focusing on the work? Yes, and they missed the forest for the trees. But the people, I mean, they eventually learn. You know, I mean, and it's, I wouldn't say that it's a way that people think anymore, but there's still a little bit of, I mean, you shouldn't walk into the lab thinking you're here to make money. That's what they're worried about. Yeah, right. Right. Had the idea to come and help me involved with the company, but there's not a pipeline of technology now from your lab to that company. So they set up, licenses that for for a company that wants to do it because they have no idea coming in and they tell me their ideas. I mean, there's places for that where people like, Steve Jobs needs to hold on to the image of what he wants the company to be, as opposed to, I would probably be fired from a company within a week because I just don't like telling people tell me what to do. That's just a fact. Yeah. So, where you're at right now with this cancer research, would this be applied when real world scenario is the protein structure? Now you can predict molecules that might come into it. So today's of the dance of the immune system talks or doesn't to cancer. If we can find a particular place that might be an Achilles heel along the way towards shutting down that is different, for instance, than what the current drugs are. Well, maybe we should name it that. There's so many more opportunities that are suddenly opening up in front of us because the AI and the data is letting us look at a network of how the system is working. I mean, before, it used to be, you'd look at a computer chip and you'd see chip with a few wires. But imagine now that you, well, I don't want to do that because it'll kill the chip malfunctioning. So let me put here a little bit of pressure there, and now I can reactivate the system or the chip to work in the right way. So when you're talking about things like with your particular issue, melanoma, when you're talking about CRISPR potentially developing some sort of a topical solution that you can put on whatever issue that you have, is this AI that you've developed, this overlay AI, would actually assist CRISPR in figuring out how to create something like this? Yeah, because maybe I need to CRISPR 2 or 3 at the same time. Right. So when you're talking about and so that's really what this is where AI has let's say the omniscient that knows you and that's what excites me about it is because I'm limited in how much I can keep in my mind at one time. Right, but with the right question, years old again. Because I this area so fast and there's, I can already see the work that we're doing dozens of potential target opportunities.
So genocide means the killing of people.
Yeah, but I mean, with the exponential discoveries that exponential increase in our lifetime, and then I think AI is some new thing that is going to throw all that into just a giant monkey wrench in the gears of our understanding of how quickly technology evolves. Well, look at Neuralink. There's an example. This is a woman now who can think very thoughtful stuff happen.
And in Leviticus chapter 29,
it was Neuralink that showed some of these
verse
results. So fast forward, I mean, already in an exponential increase in what it is that we need to accomplish. AI will help us accomplish things faster. I can see a time where, I can maybe apply something that helps
offering a
some sort of net over my head that allows me to think through these problems.
The term definitely has
AI becomes an agent
value to it. It
to
definitely
my
has
thought
a sense of
processes.
everything being
Not
built up,
only what
even
it is
though,
that I think, but maybe it provides information back into my system.
not actually
Not having to go through the years. So I can much more quickly
shot than others,
come
but
to
still,
conclusions. Now there's all kinds of
it does have some kind of totality to it. But at the same time, it has theological problems. Like, are we actually going to say
perhaps
that
again naively so.
if
I do, but I
are
prefer
serving
that kind of
as
an outcome
the
because
sacrificial
if you're not
lamb,
an
so to speak,
optimist,
what does
then
that
there
mean?
will be no progress because all you'll do
How
is
do we
worry
say that
about
connects to
disaster.
God
Yes, that's a
receiving
good
a
but
pleasing odor?
also
It's a very
realistic.
problematic
We
term.
might
So
make it
for that reason, many
yes,
religious thinkers
and I think we
prefer
are
not to use the
the
term
superior one.
Holocaust, and they rely on
I welcome the day of
the
our AI
Korban
overlords
destruction.
running the
And
government
that Korban
rather
is
than hopefully in a
specifically
biased way. I've said that too, and people get horrified because they're like, well, people are going to be
in
programming AI.
586 before the
Do you
common
read
era,
the Naruto?
70 of the
Are
common
you a
era.
sci-fi?
So for religious
You
thinkers,
know,
the term
look
Korban
at the
is definitely
the culture
popular,
series, or
but it also
Nature,
has a kind of religious coloration that is
universe,
problematic
they're like,
for more secular.
so
In
basically,
Israel, the
we'll
most
live
popular
there,
term is that that
postulate a future where
also
AI more or less
refers to the Bible, but it does not have that
when
same
did they write this
connotation
stuff?
connected
Probably
to
10, 15 years ago, but it's still, but Neil Asher still has stuff coming out regularly. concerned about
we should
things
be
go Scottish
careful
fold.
because some of the
Neil
terms
Asher's
that are
still
used,
alive.
I personally think are rather
His stuff is quite
unethical.
full of ideas.
The
Check it out.
extermination of the Jews
But
of Europe.
the AIs are also
Extermination is a
hilarious.
term we use
I
for
mean, it's not
war,
like,
which
I mean,
plays
they
right
get into their own hijinks along the way,
ethnic
and
with
some of
regards
them
to
are dark
destruction of this
and
population of
rogue,
people.
and so
There
there are
are
a lot of
certain
fun
terms like
to
final
read,
solution
and Ian
and
Banks
rules
especially
which
is
were actually
hilarious.
coined by Nazis
In
themselves.
his writing
Here
style,
you
you
see
would
a
love it.
mugshot of Herman Good
So,
from
the idea of a benign AI or
like this.
a benevolent AI ruling over us,
Like that. So
I think people are
Holocaust is
horrified
a
by that,
difficult term
but yet at
to
the
use.
same
It has
time,
some problems with it,
constantly
but nevertheless
terrified
it is
by human corruption, which is ubiquitous. Yes.
popular in the English
And
language.
ubiquitous in America, where we're supposed to be
So when we
the
go to
torch
the
bearer
historical Vatican,
for the greatest experiment in self-government the world has ever seen. This is us. Yeah, and we're corrupt as
they're
fuck.
spread out across Europe.
Exactly. It's humans. Because humans are kind of gross in a lot of ways, at least some of us. That's because we live in a scarcity society. Right. And if AI enables a post-scarcity,
Speak German very well,
we
just
have
like
nothing to
Germans
do but sit
tend
around
to
and
have less
try out various new drugs. Yeah, that's where we enjoy socialism. Because a lot of people think that's one of the reasons why we're in a scarcity society. Is because small groups of people have gathered up most of the resources, right? And are in constant control of them, right? Especially when you deal with resources that are the Earth's resources, like for you to be sucked with blood of the earth out and selling it for $100 a barrel, right? Like, don't get me started. Don't get me started either. No, but I mean, that again, is that, you know, with enough push and pull,
xenophobia,
AI will enable us to
get to the modern period,
move towards
there
post-scarcity.
is a very kind of quasi
I think so too, and I think in doing so, it'll expose vampires
largely
because the resistance to exposing this is going to be fantastic, right? Which is going to be very interesting to watch because they have no choice but to be transparent, and they have no choice but to start using AI. So you have AI is going to be inculcating itself across society in various ways where it becomes indispensable.
altogether
And then we'll start to
in a
move up
global
the chain,
conspiracy
where eventually even
dominate
CEOs
other
probably,
in a way in which they dominate, which obviously is very difficult because
or
the Jews
CEOs,
are a tiny minority of the
studies have
population,
shown that
is
there's more
specifically in some
psychopathic
kind of
tendencies
cancerous
there
or
are
bacteriological
that you know about corporate environments because of just selling
German
inventions.
language novel from
That's
1920
real. Oh, it's really
shows
weird. It's weird when you encounter them.
hideous kind
When
of
you encounter
culture
like complete
that's laid down
sociopathic
this
CEOs.
shirtless
But look
man.
at how,
And what
I mean,
this
I'm going to
picture
get in trouble
meant to
for
say
saying
is
this,
that
but I
the
don't care.
Jews
This is
are like
show.
carrion eaters.
They're probably
They live on decay. They're going to
I don't care.
dominate the otherwise
So,
healthy,
you know,
strong,
imagine
muscular
two
Aryan
tribes.
races. And once they
One
come
tribe
out
is
like a
relatively,
cancer
you know,
from within,
civilized.
then they will feed
Just
on
wants
their
to live
corpse.
in
The title, by the way,
harmony. Another has a psychopathically broken, enraged
sin
his
against the blood,
followers of the other tribes
novel of the time.
to attack the other one.
There's
a gene set that makes one
more
person,
assimilated,
you know,
actually fed into a lot of this, such as, for example, you see this really bizarre form of children's propaganda published in the 1930s by Elvira Bauer, a really
right, and suddenly now, but when those tribes are separated,
this is a book that
it
just
was
called
totally fine, but now you live in an environment where we don't know where the edge of one tribe begins and another.
The thing about toadstools is that they
And
look
suddenly
like
you have
mushrooms,
this environment
but
where
unless you are
psychopathic
very
individuals
careful
can
and you
freely
know the signs, you will always
and aren't
mistake
obvious.
them for healthy
Right.
mushrooms. And you might
Right now, again, I'm sure there's some social scientists who
So
say
to the metaphor goes that the Jews look like regular Germans, but in reality they are quite distinct, racially different, and they represent
when you're dealing with office environments and the culture of a specific corporation, humans have an ability to act like they're supposed to act in that world, and it makes it very difficult to discern who's a sociopath, because you're all kind of following an act, right? Yes.
vicious tarantula,
There are the rules that you're supposed to follow, and then there's the edge of the rules.
Warsaw Ghetto that shows that the Jews carry typhus are associated with this deadly life-sparing
Told
disease.
to me by
So,
the chairman of
and
my
here
first
finally,
department,
here's an Austrian example. This is
then I would be
terrifying.
here today.
Again,
So
from
I
the elections
I
like that,
basically
early
found
war
I
period,
got permission
the
to
Jew is portrayed as
do what
some
I did.
kind of like devilish
And
snake
basically
strangling
the chairman.
Austrian
But
people.
that's only because I dared to do it.
The image reads
Yeah.
German Deutsche Christen,
Because you have to
Österreich,
believe
which means
in the
German
value of what you're
Christians,
trying to do. Right.
save Austria,
Well, that's
right? Meaning you have to vote
see, this
for
is
a
the problem
particular
that I have with
party in order to
corporations. I
save
think it has a
Austria
structure.
from
When you have
this
something that has
Jewish
an
snake,
obligation
by
to
the
its
way, is
shareholder
associated with the
to
communist
consistently make more money
our line
every quarter,
thing.
every year,
That's the kind of
constantly. You're in
atmosphere
a
that
constant growth
Hitler
cycle.
came of
Then you have
age.
to do whatever it
Here's
takes.
an image
But
of
you have to
Hitler
survive.
as a
If you want to
baby.
survive as a
It's kind of
CEO,
a chilling image
we don't
to
want
look
some
at.
fucking
Hitler had a
kumbaya
difficult
shithead
relationship with
ruining
his
our stock
father,
profile.
who was much
Our
older
portfolio.
than his
Get to
mother.
work, right?
When
Get shit
his
done.
father
If you
passed
want to
away at
survive
18,
and
that allowed
succeed as a
Hitler
CEO,
himself a little
it
bit more
encourages
freedom because
so
he had
see,
always wanted
the
to be an
stock market,
artist.
as valuable
He
as
had
it is,
some
is the great
niggling talent here. You can see some of his artwork that's
system
actually
that allows you to
available
separate
on the
your
web.
morals.
Unfortunately for the young adult,
The
he
stock
was not
market is
especially
doing much.
talented, and he was
And if you're part
rejected
of a
from
corporation, there's this
Vienna
infusion
School
of
of Art.
responsibility
A
because
rejection that
the
stung him
whole
bitterly, and in
machine
fact,
might be
he
doing
complained
evil,
about it
but
in his memoirs later. He always felt that
I'm an unapologetic
somehow
capitalist.
his
You know,
rightful
like many
place in the
companies.
Vienna
Good for
School
you.
of Art was taken by a
Do it
Jewish
because it's the
advocate,
best thing
and it's this
for
idea of the replacement
But I-
theory.
You know,
Meaning that
I
Hitler
hope to
felt
live
he
in a
should
world
have been
where
in
there will
the
be this
Vienna
kind of
School of
stuff,
Art, but a Jew
post-scarcity
had
environment
replaced him. A Jew had
do let AI do a lot
supplanted
of the
his
stuff that would
rightful
otherwise
place
be
in
the
the
place where
incoming
corruption
student body.
manipulates
That's something that,
yes.
by the way,
My only fear
reverberates
with AI
throughout
really is automation and the
white
complete
nationalist, white
removal of the
supremacist thought right up
gigantic
into America
swath
in
of
the
the
early
American workforce.
21st century.
And the global
At any rate,
workforce.
he
That's scary
found
shit. That's coming.
new
Yeah,
purpose, world
it's inevitable, and I just don't think any solution
and
universal basic
he was
income
actually
is going
wounded
to remedy
during
that.
World War I.
And even that, the problem I have with that is that goes against human nature. And that's a problem.
Discussed in
It
the previous
removes
lecture.
people's
But when
identity, removes their
Germany
sense of worth.
surrendered in November 1918,
Yeah, I agree.
he, like
No, I
many
don't-
other
I-
Germans, felt that this was
in
a
some ways,
stab in the back
happy that I'm
that was
64 years
somehow
old and I'm not
orchestrated
going to
by
have to deal with some of the
Jews.
problems. I think you're going to have to deal with it, dude. I think you're going to live.
Propaganda cartoon that captures the idea of
Also,
the stab in the back,
you're
which
privy to a lot of
is
information,
Rothschild.
and you're
And
going to
you
know
can
when
see
things are
by the way, I'm using
valuable.
Austrian materials here. We should mention that Hitler himself
When
was
you
actually an
think
Austrian.
of the
Austria and
potential for
Germany, although they are
AI,
separate countries, they are really in one larger
I think there's
cultural
a
unit. And
balance, right?
Austria
There's a
would
battle.
join
I
with
think there's a
Germany
real
in
problem
Anschluss,
with AI in terms of
prosecute
military
the war
objectives.
together. But
It's a
that's
real problem
later on.
because it's
Anyway,
not
here
going
is
to
an
make moral and
Austrian
ethical
depiction of the
decisions. It's
anger
just
that
going to say,
many
like, well,
Austrians
the
felt
decision
over
they
the
made clear, I am
surrender in World War
yeah,
I.
if you want me to
Here's a
succeed,
lantern
don't just
jawed
put it there.
Austrian soldier with a steely gaze, defending the
That scares the shit
Western
out of me.
front. And
You know,
sneaking up behind him
I
is
think
this
it should.
hideous looking woman
I don't know what
that has
I
a
don't know what the answer is, but there's plenty of people
Jewish
working
star on
in
the
the area.
French style hat
I
that
try
she
to
is wearing.
to
And
the
with this
positive
leering smile,
aspects of
she's
what I think
stabbing him
AI
in the
can
back.
do in
The Jews
science.
somehow betrayed
And
Germany and
for
Austria
instance,
from
it's
within,
enabled me to take
causing
my lab
a
from
lot
30
of
people
anti-war
down
sentiment
to
and
6.
causing the Germans to
Right, I don't need to produce.
surrender
Okay, so
prematurely
it's actually
before they
already
could have actually
reduced the
won.
workforce in my own lab.
Hitler
Because I
came
don't
back
need
from
to
the
produce
war,
more data.
got very much involved in right-wing politics. He participated in the
I
year
think
called
every
Putsch,
invention
that was
that's
actually
been truly
an
groundbreaking
insurrection for which he was arrested
this year,
and sent to
people,
jail. Here
and
is a
worried
picture of him,
about
believe it or not, in
potential
jail. He
negative
actually
side
has a
effects.
very cushy on there. The judge who
There's a lot of
sentenced
people,
him
and
was
it's like,
clearly
this
very
should not be a thing.
sympathetic
This is
to
terrible.
Hitler's
It's gonna ruin
aims, and although he
society.
could not
People thought
let him off
books
scot-free,
were
he
going
gave
to
him a
ruin
very, very
things.
light
There's
sentence
a lot
to
of people
jail,
that thought
very
writing
brief duration,
was going to
and
ruin
allowed
your memory.
personal chef for all
Right.
kinds of ridiculous things. And it was
Being credited
this
this
jail
ruin us
for
all.
his right wing. And while he was there, he wrote his memoir,
classes and AIs.
My Struggle, in which he essentially laid out his political program. It's a rambling, frequently incoherent document that lists all of his anti-Semitic claims and his ambitions for Germany and so on. And essentially, this gave him, when he was
I don't want to uplift it to
a lot more
You don't want
popularity.
anybody controlling it on
Used
ads.
these thugs that were organized
Maybe
in
I'm a dog.
so-called brown shirts, the Sturm Dialogue, to
That's right now.
intimidate much of the population in the various elections that were held
They're on sale right
in
now.
the
But I think what's
1920s
interesting about AI
but
is, we
never
see it as a
gained
tool
a majority
as
of
opposed
the
to
vote with his
actually
Nazi
pretty
party.
soon
Here
it
you
will
can see
be a
the
colleague.
elections of
And pretty soon
1928.
it
We
will
only got
be
2%
entity
of the popular vote. Primary
right,
opponents to
as
the Communist
consciousness
Party.
in terms
In
of
March 1933,
consciousness
garnered
that something to think about. That it's,
33%. With a lot of dirty tricks, but ultimately, if you look at the comparison with the other parties, you can see the communists lost quite a bit in that last election. The Social Democratic Party, the second largest, only had 20% of the vote.
So
in
whether it's
the
conscious or not, or whether it acts like it's
coalition-style
conscious doesn't
government
matter so
that
much
was
to me
prominent
as
in
to
many
whether or
European
not
countries at the time,
I can
Hitler
use
was
it
given
or
the
work with it
opportunity
and
as the leader of the
I'm an
largest single
introvert,
party,
as
the
it turns out.
plurality,
I would love to
form a
have
government.
somebody that I can
And
talk
that's
to
when
honestly
he
about
was
just
able
what it is
to
that I'm interested in,
proceed
as
early
opposed to having
on
to deal with small talk at a party.
identify Jews, the Nuremberg law that
When
clearly
you think
identified
about
them by
the
racial
evolution of this stuff,
characteristics. That is how much
one of the
blood
things
was
that kind
in
of
them
freaks
as
me out
measured
is
by
it
their
seems like
grandparents.
integration is our only option for
Really,
survival.
a racist
And
society
what we're
that
looking
was
at right now,
dependent for
we
all
see
kinds
just
of
a
advancement
biological
careers and public
any sort of.
on whether or not one is
I think
free
that
from any
is
taint of
being as weird as someone
removed
today
from
who
civil
doesn't have a cell
service,
phone.
from
That's a really funny. Yeah.
and
The cell phone area with
gradually
you,
push
right?
them out
And
of
eventually,
society.
this is more, this is super inefficient to be actually
The
have to
largest
go
attack
look
of
things
its
up
kind,
and use your thumb in comparison to a
widespread
human
learning
neural
of
interface that
synagogues
allows you to
itself was done
instantaneously access large language models,
broken
right? Like
glass
that.
that literally
Not only that, but then why do we have
and it was kind of like the last
different
warning
fucking languages
for
do we have?
Jews
I
in
don't
Germany
even know.
that
Thousands.
they had better get
I
out.
don't know.
The difficulty was
How about
that
one
although many Jews
universal
were really
language that
quite
everybody with a
willing
chip
to leave
gets?
Germany, and a large
And then,
number of them did,
boy, do we have a soup of ideas going around, and no problem with language barriers, no problem with cultural barriers. But then do you have a problem with the edge of who you are versus who the other person is? I don't think that. I think that we become a hive mind. I think that's ultimately, I think that's ultimately the evolution of human beings. And look, I know you've done a lot of work with UAPs and the like, and I think you've done some really fantastic work, and you're very objective in your analysis of what this whole situation is. When I look at artificial intelligence and I look at this thing that's clearly taking place right now, and I see what human beings are like in comparison to what they used to be like, and especially when you look at like ancient hominids, the alien archetype, this thing that everybody sees, so those many different ones, that kind of looks like what we seem to be going in the direction of being. Right. Yeah, which is one of them real odd. So if you just for a moment take UAP and aliens out, or ET, or interdimensionals, whatever you want to call them, out of the question and fast forward what humanity's going to do in 1,000 years, and our ability to expand into a local galaxy, we're not going to go as ourselves. We're going to go as AI conjoined entities like Abaddon. And so when you go somewhere, let's say we don't have the warp drive, you're not going to send yourself. You're going to send an AI intermediary who's going to establish humanity, or whatever it is we think humanity will be in 1,000 or 5,000 years in that local environment. And so I think the extent to whatever it is that UAP are here today is somebody else's civilization's version of just this. Behind whatever this is that we might be allegedly, etc., dealing with, isn't the thing that's going to show up. So to the extent that Neil deGrasse Tyson is right about anything, the person who gets on the ship, or whatever it is that sends it off, is not the same thing that gets off on the other side. But you're going to send missionaries or intermediaries or probes or whatever. And if you're going to with the most likely goals, rather than something that whatever it was that you were a million years ago. That makes sense. Right. I get what you're saying. So you make something that looks like the logo, so they're more likely to accept that it's a real thing. It's a real thing, but you're not going to make something that looks like a human because then you mistake it as a human. Right. But you might make something that looks more or less enough like a human, but enough like an alien that you're going to recognize it as an alien. Again, I'm just speculating. So right. So the Daily Mail don't say, put an article out tomorrow. Oh, they're going to do that. I'm going to do it anyway. Some of the stuff that I'm seeing with this is supposed to be is ridiculous, but yeah, they have me too. They get everybody. But how did you even get involved in this? Let's bring it to that. Like, so what was your initial introduction to this? Did you have any interest in the idea of UAPs or UFOs? I had a general, and so once YouTube started becoming a thing, and you're clicking around, and I said, oh, UFOs, that's kind of cool. I read nothing but sci-fi. Pathetically narrow. In that sense. Early days of YouTube, and I came across this thing called the Atacama mummy. You probably get that little mummy that was claimed to be an alien.
He left behind a diary in which he meticulously related the weather and a lot of his personal concerns. He was very worried about the fate of his son who was missing and so on. But he describes in excruciating detail the slowly compressing fist that the Nazis held around the Jewish population and the way in which he tried to appease them without inflicting too much harm on the people as a whole. Ultimately, by 1942, when it was clear that the Nazis intended to destroy the entire population, he committed suicide by swallowing his eye. Other youth leaders, such as Heinrich Trotsky, however, were widely regarded by the Jewish population as villains who sought to aggrandize themselves on the cost of the suffering of the larger population. Here is some currency printed in the Liechtenstein ghetto by Rothschild himself, which portrayed him as some kind of like redemptionist, messianic-like figure who was frequently derided in the local population as king time for the way in which he ordered the population. It seems that the Nazis had not clearly articulated what they wanted to do with this ghetto. In some places, like Deutsch, which was run by Rothschild, it seems that the model was reductionist, meaning that there was a purpose for having the Jews in ghettos that was somehow related to their utility for the war effort. Which was a major textile center, and the Jews there were put to work creating, uniforms for Nazi soldiers and linings and things like that. And so having a work permit was essentially a lifeline for the Jewish religion. Somehow the ghetto sort of made sense as they were potential slave labor. On the other hand, other ghettos like Warsaw, where Adam Cherniker was active, seemed to be attritions in nature, meaning the whole point of the ghetto was simply to have the Jews starve to death, and very few provisions were provided to them. The Jews were reduced to either dying of starvation or of typhus or of being shot, particularly children, for attempting to smuggle into outside the walls. Order was maintained, or a semblance of order was maintained in the ghetto by the so-called Jewish police, who were set up by, are hated by the local population for their enforcement objectives. There's a tremendous amount to say about the nature of life or destruction. There were notable episodes of resistance in the ghettos. Perhaps most famous is that the Warsaw Ghetto, the uprising occurred in April of 1943. Just by that date, however, you get a sense of the fact that the resistance happened quite late. The ghetto was largely empty of its Jews in the summer of 1942, and there was a small remnant that chose to heroically, albeit symbolically. On the other hand, there are other ways of looking at resistance in the ghetto that affirm life without necessarily taking up arms against it. One great example of that is the spiritual resistance that was organized by Rabbbi Shapiro, shown here, known as the Ish Kodesh, a rabbi who continued to be active throughout the entire period in Warsaw, organizing clandestine gatherings of Jews to hear Hasidic philosophy and giving Jews strength for the international ambition. In 1942, however, the Nazis moved to a new phase of the murder process, which will involve the death penalty. That we will cover next. Hello, fellow students of Jewish history. Welcome to another lecture in the Jewish History Lab series. We are now continuing our discussion of the Holocaust. These lectures are intended for educational purposes only. One of the historiographic challenges of studying the Holocaust is defining precisely what is it that we mean when we're speaking about the Holocaust. Are we talking about the overall period of persecution that the Jews suffered through, as well as other peoples, during the reign of terror of Adolf Hitler? That could easily take us back into the early 1930s. Or are we speaking about something more narrowly focused, like the persecutions that came along with the invasion of Poland in September 1939? That's also quite a reasonable possibility. But the Holocaust and World War II are overlapping and not identical phenomena. Coming to the core of the events which we associate with the Holocaust involve two major periods of Nazi activity: the period of the Einsatzgruppen and the period of the death camps. This is the era in which the Nazis enacted actual mass murders, as opposed to the horrific conditions that were endured by Jews during the period of the ghettos. So let us look at those two moments in particular. We recall that one of the prerequisites of the beginning of hostilities in September 1939 is the sealing of a non-aggression pact between the Soviet Union and the Third Reich, which allowed both Stalin and Hitler to invade Poland and the Baltic states and simply divide up the territory between them. That meant that a significant number of Jews found themselves inside the Soviet orbit between 1939 and 1941. I have a longer lecture on that topic specifically in a different series. See my YouTube channel on the Holocaust for a longer discussion of what happened there. But basically, Jews there, like the surrounding people, were subjected to rapid communization, collectivization of farms, arrest of intelligentsia, and so on. The Holocaust per se really begins, in my humble opinion, with the end of that Soviet period on June 22nd, 1941, with the launch of Operation Barbarossa, which was the Third Reich's double cross of the Soviet Union, abrogating that non-aggression pact, as Hitler surprised Stalin with a massive, rapid advance into Soviet territory. Now, why that is specifically connected to the Holocaust is because behind the Wehrmacht troops, behind the regular army that were sent in to defeat the Soviet Union, Hitler sent 4 mobile killing squads called Einsatzgruppen. As you can see in this map here, these 4 squads spread out throughout the territory that they conquered in the Soviet Union, and their
task was not to prosecute the war against the Soviets, but to prosecute Hitler's war against the Jews. They would go into the local villages known as Shtetlach, little Jewish townlets that dotted the countryside, round up the local Jewish population along with other enemies of Hitler, such as communist leaders. The Einsatzgruppen would march these Jews and others out local ravines. If there were no, they would have the Jews dig their own graves, and then they would simply shoot them by firing squad. This is sometimes called the Holocaust by bullets because it represented a remarkably large number of casualties, civilian casualties of the war. Estimates range from 1.5 to 2.5 million Jews were killed during this process. And here you can see a map from the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum that gives you a sense of the scope of the townlets that were attacked in this nature. Kiev, which was not a town but rather a large city, had one of the largest of these mass killings. 33,000 Jews killed in the space of 2 days. The ravine called Babi Yar was used for a much larger number of Ukrainians and other opponents of the Third Reich for coming months. The so-called Holocaust by bullets, however, proved to be a very inefficient and psychologically a very taxing form of mass murder. So the Nazis looked to a new way to rid themselves of their Jewish problem, so to speak. This was discussed at an important conference that took place at a resort at Wannsee on January 20th, 1942. Note the rather late date. The war began in 1939, Operation Barbarossa, which represents the first mass killings of Jews. The only thing that comes close to it before that would have been Kristallnacht in 1938, which had about 260 Jews killed. Now we're talking about hundreds of thousands, even millions of Jews killed in Barbarossa. But that was not fast enough, and it proved to be too hard on the psychological makeup of the soldiers who were engaged in these killing squads. So at Wannsee, this conference, which was chaired by Adolf Eichmann, shown here, they drew up a list of all of the Jews in Europe, a terrifying list, in my humble opinion, perhaps the most terrifying document that survived the German archives of the period. And you can see from this list of countries that it included countries that had not yet even been conquered by Germany, such as, for example, the United Kingdom, and it included even 200 Jews living in Albania, giving you a sense of just how determined the Nazis were to hunt down every last Jew of Europe. They counted up 11 million Jews, and from the Wannsee conference, it appeared that they intended to massacre all of them. The means to be used was gas poisoning, which they had already been experimenting with for some time. Chelmno was one of the regions where a gas chamber was constructed in order to see if they could scale this up, and in fact, the Nazis committed themselves to do so at that Wannsee conference. Here is a map that shows you the 6 so-called extermination camps. I personally don't like that term. The German term was Vernichtungslager, which means make into nothing camps, or destruction camps, or perhaps most simply death camps. These 6 death camps, Chelmno, Treblinka, Sobibor, Majdanek, Belzec, and Auschwitz, were situated in and around the Generalgouvernement, which still had a very large concentration of Jews in the ghettos that we discussed in the previous video. And they were very different in terms of camps from the concentration camps, which Hitler had set up from the early 1930s. Unlike the concentration camps, which held largely non-Jews, particularly in the early period, they were political enemies of Hitler. Concentration camps were horrific, awful places with a significant death rate of people dying from things like starvation and abuse, but they were nothing like the death camps. The death camps were intended primarily for the purpose of creating death. They were factories of death. Many of them had satellite camps that were used for slave labor, but it only represented a very small proportion of the Jews who were interned in these death camps. here you get a sense of the process of deportations from all around Europe, including regions that were conquered nearly at the very end of the war, when it was clear that Nazis were going to lose World War II. Places like northern Italy and Hungary, Jews were deported there in a last-ditch attempt to murder as many Jews as possible. What was the process? Jews were rounded up and placed on cattle cars, some 6,000 a day leaving Warsaw. And then when they disembarked, often after a terrifying and horrific, long journey from places as far away as Paris, where many of whom had died actually en route, they disembarked and they were subject to selection, where those small numbers of Jews who were deemed to be healthy enough to work in the slave labor camp were isolated and sent away to those satellite camps. The vast majority of the rest of Jews were shorn of anything that could possibly be of value on their persons, not only their personal belongings, but also their prosthetic limbs, eyeglasses, gold teeth, even their hair was taken from them. And then they were sent to these gas chambers where they were made to think they were being sent to be deloused, to have lice removed from their bodies. This was very common in many of these camps. That even the Americans later would use DDT to try and remove lice from troops and from prisoners. But in reality, the gas that was used was Zyklon B, a rat poison that was poured in typically through the roof, and then Jews were exposed to it and died within 20 or 30 minutes of horrible asphyxiation. Then bodies were sent to crematoria in an attempt to get rid of the huge number of corpses, perhaps 1,500 a day in Auschwitz that would pile up. The crematoria, however, were very inefficient, and frequently the bodies simply had to be burned out in open air. Those small number of Jews who were sent for slave labor were sent to live in barracks and labor under unimaginable conditions. The vast majority of them died within a very short period of time because they were considered disposable. But those Jews who survived the Holocaust in these camps were typically the Jews who were not immediately processed for gassing, but rather managed to live because they were sent for slave labor. Other Jews were selected for medical experimentation. Horribly cruel, genetic experiments were conducted on children in particular if they were identical twins. In the end, when they liberated the camps, they found a small number of emaciated Jews who had just barely survived the war. This is one of the most horrific chapters in Jewish history, perhaps in world history. Thank you very much for watching. Hello, students of Jewish history. Welcome to another lecture in the Jewish History Lab series. We are now continuing our discussion of the Holocaust. These lectures are intended for educational.
Dude, how you living, pimp? Dude. Dude, how are you?
You know, I kept on getting text messages today just telling me to finish my McDonald's application, and it got really annoying that I actually ended up fucking finishing my McDonald's application because I don't want to get text messages.
Good job, man. Dude, I was reading, this was interesting, on the McDonald's subreddit. Again, I don't eat there, but I do find the company to be part of Americana, and thus I follow it pretty closely as to, like, I don't know, I like the drama of, like, what goes on there, and you learn a lot about corporate America from that subreddit and the Walmart subreddit and, like, these large company subreddits. All right, so on the McDonald's employees one, there was a guy who was, like, 34 years old, working in Australia at McDonald's, and said that they loved it. And they couldn't believe how much they loved it. They said, you know, some of it's mindless, but some of it's really relaxing. And then somebody else came in from from Australia who also said that they loved it. And I just thought, you know, if these guys are like 34 loving it, then that's something that, you know, Zoot probably could do and probably would enjoy it too. I'm not guaranteeing it, but all right. So good job.
How long have they been working on?
One of them was a year, and the other one I think was 2 years. So that was just something that I thought was interesting. All right, big dog. Are you ready?
To lose at Dungeon Code? Yeah.
Dungeon, unless
It's the one we play the least.
yeah, that's probably true.
I mean, we played Match Monster for the least, and now we enjoy that.
We love that game.
I just sent you an invitation.
All right, big dog.
Okay.
Read.
First one.
No.
It's been a week at the sea since you commented up at the Iron Car Trading Company, Black Loom and Lightning Strike to the water. Batten down the hatches.
Okay. With the weather this bad, your group rushes to secure the hatches. What do we do?
We're good.
Yeah, you got to read faster though.
Pirates suddenly appear on the decks, startling everyone. Captain yells, engage. Okay. Oh, yeah. That's good. That's also good. silhouetted by lightning strikes.
Silhouetted.
Silhouetted by lightning strikes. A massive gallon crashes alongside your ship. Dozens of pirates toss grapple lines onto your ship. Prepare for battle. Cast breakwater. Oh yeah, we got it.
You're not reading. You fill gills.
The sea darkens in your eyes when you awake. You are in tall shape of Kraken's head, wreckage, and dead sailors littered the beach. Search for survivors. Loot the bodies. Loot the bodies. Okay, that's good. You find the ship captain's clutching a map in one hand and he's barely alive. Lying on the ground, run through with arrows, is the captain. Hold. Okay, we can't do anything with the captain. The captain causes up blood, find the sea will Blair in your wavelength. You're lost to the northwestern sky is a huge smoking mountain top. To the northeast, a dense jungle. Do we go to the volcano or kind of jungle?
Jungle.
Last time we went to the volcano, we got fucked.
Right.
The last time we chose the volcano, we got fucked.
Right. You're not reading.
After a good amount of walking through
You need to
you
read faster.
advance towards the huts, but you see no one suddenly around you. Do we check later or intimidate or stand off?
Challenge him, dog.
Let's go, Sean. Challenge it later. The warrior challenge is the biggest lizardman. Lizardman is impressed by your brave bravado. Suddenly, a monstrous roar comes from the jungle. From out of the gigantic fog, there appears the lizard and terror. Okay, let's do what we do. That's really good. Oh fuck, the lizard just fucked me. Another shield back to the lizard. Oh, I missed. Oh, he targeted me. Oh, you're dead. You think I can win?
It'll be interesting.
Oh, fuck. Hold on. Are you dead now?
Oh yeah, I'm dead.
Oh, no, you're back.
I came
You
back.
strike your fire and blows against the base and the rods. The lizard men show you the hidden path behind the jungle to the pirate queen's citadel. She commands a huge fleet of ships. Sneak around the ship, cause a distraction. Sneak around the ship.
You got it.
You're not in good health. But you're a one-hit kill right now.
All right.
You make it into the deck and cover shadows begin to set out and the voice calls to you. From the captain's quarters, Hela the pirate tried to take her own ship. She draws a sword. Oh, fuck. That's not good. That's not good at all. That's not good.
This pirate queen's a hoe.
That. What?
This pirate queen is a hoe.
Launch monsters cracking them to target the castle first. What does that do?
Fail.
Oh, fuck.
Backstab.
I'm dead.
It's over.
The cunning queen cuts you to ribbons of the quest back.
That game's awful.
We're gonna win. We need Riser.
Can you play with that many people?
You can play with like up to 5 people.
Did you know that you have an invitation?
Do you know that we're going to shoot the same much monsters and it's going to be boring as fuck?
What'd you say?
We keep on choosing the same monsters.
That's okay.
To be fair, they are the best monsters.
I think so.
So I go to my best friend's house today,
Okay. You excited?
and I went to my best friend's house today, okay? And there was a girl there that I actually been on a date with before that met her through me. So he met her through me,
Okay.
and she's staying there. And then she was like telling, she's there because she's like got nowhere else to go. She's diagnosed ADHD, diagnosed autistic, diagnosed BPD. But
What's BPD?
I feel like
Oh, I know.
borderline personality disorder. But I feel like she's in a situation where she's being medicated and told she has all these things because she has nothing. She has no other options.
Just like you.
I don't like. Yeah, like she's been told that she has all these things, but in reality, I met her 7 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, maybe less. Yes, 7 to 6 years ago, and I'm telling you right now, she was completely normal.
There you go. Just like you, son.
But she was like she just seemed like medicated and just not with it, and like she didn't like interact with me much, like, and like it wasn't like a normal conversation, and like I was like, are you like just going off this, like, are you just acting like this because you've been told that your behavior is like this and now you can get away with it?
Just like you, Zoot. You met someone who's got the same issue that you do.
Yeah. And then it hit me. It hit me all at once, right? It hit me. I don't think either of us have the issue. I feel like we've been told we have these issues and we're acting out because it's an excuse to solve it. We're looking for excuses to solve up the blame.
Precisely. You're exactly right. I'm glad you figured this out. I really am.
Unfortunately, she's heavily medicated and she can't figure it out. And she's just doing everything that she's told to do.
That is unfortunate, son. If you could only pick one match monster to have, which one would it be? Dude, I just asked you a question. Usually when people ask others questions, they expect an answer.
Sorry, Talisk.
Yeah, that's the correct answer. But you should have just said the green one.
Well, the green one evolved would be better.
Yeah. But you know what I mean.
So you don't trust psychiatry?
I didn't say that. But I don't really have that much confidence in modern medicine in a lot of ways. I think it's about profit and it's not about curing. What do I do? I mean, just in the United States, so long as the American Cancer Society has is worth billions of dollars, they don't want to find a cure for cancer. I think it's really unfortunate. It's a dirty game.
Well, here's the thing. It would be impossible to cure autism if you just tell everyone who's on the autistic spectrum to enable their autistic traits and try to make it socially acceptable to have these traits that aren't deemed normal, which is like, what the fuck? Like, it's just like contradicting. Like, it's like one of the it's so weird. You get what I'm saying?
I don't know what autism is, so not really.
I don't think anyone fucking does. I don't even think the people who study it really know what the fuck it is.
Good. I'm glad I'm not alone.
They tell me I have it, and I don't know what the fuck it is. So.
Yeah, Doug, they kind of just tell you that to get you out of their office.
What do you mean?
I mean, like, if you went to them, they basically, everyone who comes into their office, they either tell them they have autism or they don't have autism. They don't say, well,
yeah.
you might, because they don't have that. The second that in their medical autism, then they'll be like, oh, everybody's got super autism. They're just being told what they're being fed.
I think I want to have autism. Yeah, that's not.
I know you in the 1980s with the movie, at least in the United States, Rain Man. And they made it seem not that bad because it's like, okay, well, you get these like superpowers. Like you can count toothpicks and count cards. And in reality, those, it's like a really bad life. I mean, you have like a lot of social issues. But
I mean, that's not autism. That's the Down syndrome.
which is like a form of autism.
Not everyone with Down syndrome has autism.
No, I didn't say that they do.
I don't even think Rain Man had autism.
We'll have to look that one up.
Well, he did by their standards, but I don't think he had autism.
Look, I can just tell you this. I'm a little bit older than you are, and I never met anybody with autism. My parents never met anybody with autism. My grandparents never met anybody with autism. This is like a new thing. Now, I know the argument is, well, it wasn't being diagnosed or whatever. Okay, that's fine. But why is it that in the year 1980, 1 in 15,000 people were diagnosed with autism, and in the year 2025, 1 in 50 were diagnosed with autism? What changed? I mean, I'm telling you, if my grandparents would have been like, you are going to meet people in your life who have this disorder, and it's like 1 in 15 people. Fuck no. It's like they would say like, you'll meet people with special needs in the world, and you have to treat them with respect. But that was people with like Down syndrome and people who had like multiple sclerosis and that kind of stuff. I mean, it wasn't like there's this boogeyman disease that's out there, and then people use it as such an excuse. I hear it. I bet I hear it more than anybody. Maybe aside from like maybe a teacher or something in a school, because people will say, I mean, you do it, where people will be like, they'll do something rude, and I will call them on their shit, and then they'll be like, oh, it was my autism. And then I'm supposed to feel bad for that. No, dog, you are just an asshole. And you just want to blame your actions on some, like, I don't want to say it's fake and made up, but there's a spectrum of it. But just like there's a spectrum of everything, there's a spectrum of sexuality, there's a spectrum of intelligence.
I say some horrible shit, but that's Tourette's. That's not autism.
Right, exactly. Now, and I get that. When I first met you, but I'm going to tell you this, dude. I'd interacted with you for like regularly for like 3 months, and I did not know that you had Tourette's. It was pretty well hidden. And then the one day you said something, and I'm like, dude, what the fuck? And you're like, I have Tourette's. And I'm like, no, you don't. We've been interacting with you for months, and we didn't have any type of those kind of outbreaks. And then at about like 2 weeks more of interacting with you, I said, you know what, I need to go back and reevaluate what I said because it does seem like you do have something and that you can't control it. But you're right. You have Tourette's, not whatever they're saying like these people have, which is it's just a lot of times people just want excuses for things. They want to feel special too. Like, hey, what's like how can I get out of not working in the world? Oh, okay, all I have to say is that I have this perhaps disease. It's not made up. We have some issues. But some people do make it up. I mean, like doctors, if you like, I mean, I think Reddit is like one of the best sites in the world because it gives you, I don't know, at least for me, I have the ability because I have the time to be able to learn about all different types of um, professions. And like you learn about like the medical profession and like the doctor subreddit and how drugs are pushed on these doctors to prescribe them and all of the little toys they give them and they give them their kit to their kids and all of the trips that they take if they prescribe a certain amount of medicine to people and
Well, that, that that's what happened to me after I got the autism diagnosis first, right?
right
And then I get the ADHD diagnosis.